Hello, everyone, and welcome to NAU Theater's Story Hour. Today is our first broadcast. Each week, we will be reading classic stories for ages 5 to 8 and chapter books for ages 9 to 12. But we welcome kids of all ages. Check out the titles before joining our broadcast. Today's stories will be classic tales from bunnies to dragons. Our readers are Miss Haley Jo, Miss Kate, and me, Miss Kathleen. Let's get started. First up is The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. And I have a little friend here with me. This is kind of like Peter's mom. Hello. So here we go. The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a very big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go into Mr. Mcgregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. Mcgregor. Now run along and don't get into any mischief. I'm going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were all good little bunnies, and they went down the lane to gather blackberries. But Peter was a very naughty bunny and ran straight away to Mr. Mcgregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to find some parsley. But round the end of the cucumber frame, who should he meet but Mr. Mcgregor? Mr. Mcgregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on all 4 legs and was faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether if he had not, unfortunately, ran into a gooseberry net, and he got caught with one of his large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him with great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. Mcgregor came up with a scythe which he intended to pop upon Peter's head, but Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him. And he rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. And it would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not had so much water in it. Mr. Mcgregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in that tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Presently, Peter sneezed. Kerskool! Mr. Mcgregor was after him in no time, and he tried to put his foot upon Peter who jumped out of a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. Mcgregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. So he went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath, trembling with fright, and he had not the least idea which way to go. He went and he went, damp, sitting down after sitting in that can. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked. So he began to wander, going lippity, lippity, not very fast, looking all around. And that door that he found, it was too small for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. The old mouse was running in and out over a doorstep, carrying peas and beans for her family in the wood. So Peter asked her which was the way to the gate. But she had a large pea in her mouth, and she could not answer. She only shook her head at him, and Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. Mcgregor filled those water cans, and a white cat was sitting there. She was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still. But now and then the tip of her tail would flip and twitch as if it were alive. Peter thought it best not to disturb the cat and to go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, Benjamin Bunny. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard a noise of a hoe. Screech! Scratch! 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 Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed up out of the wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. Mcgregor hoeing onions. His back was turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very, very quietly off of that wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could along that straight line behind some blackcurrant bushes. Mr. Mcgregor caught sight of him in the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped under the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. Mcgregor hung up that little blue jacket and those shoes for a scarecrow so it would frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running. He looked behind him until he got home to that big fir tree. He was so tired that he lay down in the soft sand and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with all his clothes. It was only the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I'm sorry to say that Peter was not very well during that evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea. And she gave a dose to Peter. 1 spoonful to be taken at bedtime, she said. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail were all treated to bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. And next up, everyone, we have Haley Jo.
Hi friends, my name is Miss Haley Jo and I'm going to be reading The Reluctant Dragon by Kenneth Grahame to you guys today. Long ago, might have been hundreds of years ago, in a cottage halfway between this village and yonder shoulder with his wife and their little son. Now, the shepherd spent his days, and at certain times of the year his nights too, up on the wide ocean, bosom of the downs, with only the sun and the stars and the sheep for company, and the friendly chattering world of men and women far out of sight and hearing. But his little son, when he wasn't helping his father, and often when he was as well, spent much of his time buried in big volumes that he borrowed from the affable gentry and interested parsons of the country round about. And his parents were very fond of him, and rather proud of him too, though they didn't let on in his hearing. So he was left to go on his own way, and read as much as he liked, and instead of frequently getting a cuff on the side of the head, as might as very well have happened to him, he was treated more or less as an equal by his parents, who sensibly thought it was a fair division of labor that they should supply the practical knowledge and he the book learning. They knew that book learning often came in useful at a pinch in spite of what their neighbors said. What the boy chiefly dabbled in was natural history, fairy tales, and he just took them as they came in a sandwichy sort of way, without making any distinctions, and really his course of reading strikes one as rather sensible. One evening, the shepherd, who for some nights past had been disturbed and preoccupied and off his usual mental balance, came home all of a tremble, and sitting down at the table where his wife and son were peacefully employed, she with her seam, he in following out the adventures of the giant with no heart in his body, exclaimed with much agitation, "It's all up with me, Maria. Never no more can I go up on them there downs. Was it ever so?" "Now, don't you take on like that," said his wife, who was a very sensible woman. "But tell us all about it first. Whatever it is as has given you this shake-up, and then me and you and the son here. Between us, we ought to be able to get to the bottom of it." "It began some nights ago," said the shepherd. "You know that cave up there? I never liked it somehow, and the sheeps never liked it neither, and when sheeps don't like something, there's generally some reason for it. Well, for some time past, there's been faint noises coming from that cave. Noises like heavy sighing with grunts mixed up in them, and sometimes a snoring far away down, real snoring, yet somehow not honest snoring, like you and me nights, you know?" "I know," remarked the boy quietly. "Of course I was terribly frightened," the shepherd went on, "yet somehow I couldn't keep away, so this very evening before I came down, I took cast round by the cave quietly, and there, oh Lord, there I saw him at last, as plain as I see you." "Saw who?" said his wife, beginning to share in her husband's nervous terror. "Why, him, I'm telling you," said the shepherd. "He was sticking halfway out of the cave, and seemed to be enjoying the cool of the evening in a poetical sort of way. He was as big as 4 cart horses and all covered with shiny scales, deep blue scales at the top of him, shading off to a tender sort of green below. As he breathed, there was that sort of flicker over his nostrils that you see over our chalk roads on a bakeless, windless day in summer. He had his chin on his paws, and I should say he was meditating about things. Oh yes, a peaceable sort of beast enough, and not ramping or carrying on or doing anything but what was quite right and proper. I admit all that, and yet what am I to do? Scales, you know, and claws, and a tail for certain, though I didn't see that end of him. I ain't used to him, and I don't hold with them, and that's a fact." The boy, who had apparently been absorbed in his book during his father's recital, now closed the volume, yawned, clasped his hands behind his head, and said sleepily, "It's all right, father. Don't you worry. It's only a dragon." "Only a dragon?" cried his father. "What do you mean, sitting there, you and your dragon? Only a dragon indeed. What do you know about it?" "'Cause it is, and 'cause I do know," replied the boy quietly. "Look here, father. You know we've each of us got our line. You know about sheep and weather and things. I know about dragons. I said, you know, that cave up there was a dragon cave. I always said it must have belonged to a dragon some time ago and ought to belong to a dragon now. If rules count for anything, well, now you tell me it has got a dragon, and so that's all right. I'm not half as much surprised as when you told me it hadn't got a dragon. Rules always come right if you wait quietly. Now, please, just leave this all to me, and I'll show up tomorrow morning. No, in the morning I can't. I've got a whole heap of things to do. Well, perhaps in the evening, if I'm quite free, I'll go up and have a talk with him, and you'll find it'll be all right. Only, please, don't you go worrying around there without me. You don't understand him a bit, and they're very sensitive, you know. He's quite right, father, said the sensible mother. As he says, dragons is in his line and not ours. He's wonderful knowing about book beasts, as everyone allows, and to tell the truth, I'm not half happy in my own mind thinking of that poor animal lying alone up there, without a bit o' hot supper or anyone to change the news with. And maybe we'll be able to do something for him, and if he ain't quite respectable to our boy, he'll find a way out quick enough. He's got a pleasant sort of way with him that makes everybody tell him everything. The next day, after he'd had his tea, the boy strolled up the chalky track that led to the summit of the downs, and there, sure enough, he found the dragon, stretched lazily on the sward in front of his cave. The view from that point was a magnificent one. To the right and left, the bare and billowy leagues of downs. In front, the vale, with its clustered homesteads, its thread of white roads running through the orchards and well-tiled anchorage. And far away, a hint of gray old cities on the horizon. A cool breeze played over the surface of the grass, and the silver shoulder of the large moon was showing above distant junipers. No wonder the dragon seemed in a peaceful and content mood. Indeed, as the boy approached, he could hear the beast purring with a happy regularity. Well, we live and learn, he said to himself. None of my books ever told me that dragons purred. Hello, dragon, said the boy quietly when he had gotten up to him. The dragon, on hearing the approaching footsteps, made the beginning of a courteous effort to rise, but when he saw it was a boy, he set his eyebrows severely. Now, don't you hit me, he said, or bung stones or squirt water or anything. I won't have it, I tell you. Not going to hit you, said the boy warily, dropping on the grass beside the beast. And don't, for goodness sake, keep on saying don't. I hear so much of it, it's monotonous. It makes me tired. I've simply looked in to ask how you were and all that sort of thing. But if I'm in the way, I can easily clear out. I've lots of friends, and no one can say I'm in the habit of shoving myself where I'm not wanted. No, don't go off in a huff, said the dragon hastily. Fact is, I'm as happy up here as the day's long. Never without an occupation, dear fellow, never without an occupation, and yet, between ourselves, it is trifle dull at times. The boy bit off a stalk of grass and chewed it. Going to make a long stay here? He asked politely. Can't hardly say it at present, replied the dragon. It seems a nice place enough, but I've only been here a short time, and one must look about and reflect and consider before settling down. It's rather a serious thing settling down. Besides, now I'm going to tell you something. You'd never guess it, even if you tried so. Fact is, I'm such a confoundedly lazy beggar. You surprise me, the boy said civilly. It's the sad truth, the dragon went on, settling down between his paws and evidently delighted to have found a listener at last. And I fancy that's really how I came to be here. You see, all my other fellows were so active and earnest and all that sort of thing, always rampaging and squirmish and scouring the desert sands and pacing the margins of the sea and chasing knights all over the place and devouring damsels and going on generally, whereas I like to get my meals regular and then to prop my back against a bit of a rock and snooze for a bit and wake up and think of things going on and how they kept going on just the same, you know? So when it happened, I got fairly caught. When what happened, please? Asked the boy. That's just what I don't precisely know, said the dragon. I suppose the earth sneezed or shook itself or the bottom dropped out of something. Anyhow, there was a shake and a war and a general skirmish, and I found myself miles away underground, wedged in as tight as tight. Well, thank goodness my wants are few, and at any rate I had peace and quietness, and wasn't occupied, I assure you. But time went on, and there was a certain sameness about the life, and at last I began to think that It would be fun to work my way upstairs and see what you other fellows were doing. So I scratched and burrowed and worked this way and that way, and at last I came out through this cave over here. And I like the country and the view and the people and what I've seen of them, and on the whole, I feel inclined to settle down here." "What's your mind always occupied about?" asked the boy. "That's what I want to know." The dragon colored slightly and looked away. Presently he said bashfully, "Do you ever, just for fun, try to make up poetry verses, you know?" "Course I have," said the boy. "Heaps of it, and some of it's quite good, I feel sure, only there's no one here that cares about it. My mother's very kind and all that, when I read to her, and so is father for that matter, but somehow they don't seem to—" "Exactly!" cried the dragon. "My own case exactly. They don't seem to, and you can't argue with them about it. Now, you've got culture. You have. I could tell it on you at once, and I should, just like your candid opinion about some things I threw off slightly when I was down there. I'm awfully pleased to have met you, and I'm hoping the other neighbors will be equally agreeable. There was a very nice old gentleman up here last night, but he didn't seem the one to intrude." "That was my father," said the boy. "And he is a nice old gentleman, and I'll introduce you to some day if you'd like." "Can't you two come up here and dine or something tomorrow?" asked the dragon eagerly. "Only, of course, if you've got nothing better to do," he added politely. "Thanks awfully," said the boy, "but we don't go out anywhere without my mother, and, to tell you the truth, I'm afraid she mightn't quite approve of you. You see, there's no getting over the hard fact that you're a dragon, is there? And when you talk of settling down in the neighbors and so on, I can't help feeling that you don't quite realize your position. You're an enemy of the human race, you see." "Haven't got an enemy in the world," said the dragon cheerfully. "Too lazy to make 'em, to begin with. And if I do read other fellows my poetry, I'm always ready to listen to theirs." "Oh dear," cried the boy, "I wish you'd try and grasp the situation properly. When the other people find you out, they'll come after you with spears and swords and all sorts of things. You'll have to be exterminated according to their ways of looking at it. You're a scourge and a pest and a baneful monster." "Not a word of truth in it," said the dragon, wagging his head solemnly. "Character will bear the strictest investigation. And now there's a little sonnet thing I was working on when you appeared on the scene." "Oh, if you won't be sensible," cried the boy, getting up. "I'm going off home. Now, I can't stop for sonnets. My mother's stirring up. I'll look you up tomorrow sometime or the other, and do for goodness sake try and realize that you're in a pestilential scourge, or you'll find yourself in a most awful fix. Good night." The end.
That's great. Thank you, Miss Haley Joe. Next up, we have Miss Kate, who's going to be reading The Three Billy Goats Gruff.
Once upon a time, there were 3 billy goats who wished very much to climb up a hillside to where the grass was green and thick so that they might become fat. The name of all 3 was Gruff, and so they were called the 3 billy goats Gruff. To get up the hillside, they had to cross a bridge over a rushing mountain stream. Under this bridge, there lived a big, ugly troll. The youngest billy goat Gruff came to the bridge first. Tap, 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 tap went his little hooves as he ran across it. But when he was in the center of the bridge, the troll called out in a great big voice, "Who's that crossing my bridge?" "It's only me," said the first billy goat Gruff in his not very loud little voice. "Well then, I'll eat you up," the troll replied. "Oh no, please don't do that. I'm much too small and thin for you. Wait until my brother, the second billy goat Gruff, comes along. He's much bigger than I am." As he was feeling rather hungry, the troll agreed to wait. Soon, the second billy goat Gruff came to the bridge. Trip, trap, went his middle-sized hooves as he ran across. But when he got to the center, the troll called up in a great big voice, "Who's that crossing my bridge?" "It's only me," the second billy goat Gruff said in his medium-sized voice. Well then, I'll eat you up, the troll replied. Oh no, don't do that. Wait until the third billy goat Gruff comes along. He's much bigger than I am and just the right size for a fine troll like you. The troll was feeling very hungry by now, and so, once again, he agreed. Soon the third billy goat Gruff came walking over the bridge. Tramp, tramp, tramp went his big, big hooves. Who's that crossing my bridge? The troll called out in his great big voice, and the third billy goat Gruff replied in an even bigger voice, It's only me! Well then, said the troll, I'll eat you up. Come on then, said the third billy goat Gruff, and he added, I've got 2 sharp horns and to poke your nose, and lots of sharp teeth to bite you all over, and 2 pronged hooves to break your bones. The troll, who didn't really believe him, climbed up onto the bridge. The third billy goat Gruff butted the troll with his horns and bit him with his teeth and kicked him with his hooves until the big, ugly troll fell into the mountain stream and was never heard of again. As for the 3 billy goats Gruff, they went up the hillside and grew very fat indeed, and for all I know, they are still there.
Thank you, Kate. That was a lot of fun. I hope you all had fun like I did listening to these great stories. Join us later this week for chapter books. The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood, The Arabian Nights Tales, The Story of Dr. Dolittle, and A Modern Cinderella or A Little Old Shoe. It was great seeing you today and having a great time reading stories. Parents and friends, Story Hour is NAU Theater's project to give back to the community, locally and beyond. We thank you for joining us, and if you like what you see, please share our video. And you can also like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the stories we're telling on Story Hour are in public domain. If you want to get a copy, you can check out the Gutenberg Library Project or other online public domain sources. Until next time, keep reading.